Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the Computer Says Yes sessions, supported by Policy Exchange and Lloyds Banking Group. We've got a superb panel for you. There's probably no greater concentration of digital expertise anywhere on the planet outside Silicon Valley than there is on this table this lunchtime. I will introduce everyone and myself in a moment, but first of all, to answer your probably question about why you've got that particular cardboard device in front of you, Jack from Lloyds Banking Group is going to talk us into a little demonstration that will set the scene for the discussion this lunchtime.
Okay, hi everyone. So each of you on your chair should have a pair of Google Cardboard and a smartphone. So what we're going to do today is a bit of a demo experiment where we're going to get you all to see what digital could look like for consumers in the UK going forward in the next few years. So what you'll need to do is pick up your smartphone and unlock it. So some of you may be unfamiliar with these. These are Android. So if you do get stuck, Lauren is at the back and she'll run and help you. So each handset has the LBG Future Innovation app on it, developed by our innovation team at Lloyds. What we're going to ask you to do in a second is load up the app and then put the app into the front of the cardboard. Now just to, it will ask you for a password at the start, and then during the app it will say look right on the app. So when it says that, you physically need to look right. So once you've unlocked your handset, go into the app menu, and then you should also find the Future Innovation app. Might be called LBG Innovation. Has everyone found that?
Nope. Which one's the app menu?
Cool. So the app menu here is the button.
Okay, I think that is the app menu, and then you want the second screen of the app menu.
Mine seems to be doing it.
You're getting there.
You worked out. Eh? You should know what you're doing. I should really.
LBG Innovation.
Tough one.
And then LBG button. Over.
2 seconds. At the same time.
It's gone off again.
That's gone.
You spent half the time, but this is the thing crawling around with them road.
Okay, so it's this, is it?
Crawling around with them road.
Yes, and they want second screen of that.
I've done
Okay.
last week and this
You
week.
should all have this screen looking like this, ready for the password to be entered. Has everyone got that?
Yeah. No, exactly. That's the issue. So this one we shouldn't be too specific.
Cool, we all ready? Yeah, okay. So what you need to do when you enter the password is press let's go, and then you'll get to see a 60-second countdown. You take your phone and you put it into the slot in the front of the glasses like that, and then look through, and then the experience will start, okay? So the password is the number or digit 1, simply the number 1.
That's it.
Cool, and then you should see a countdown start. So you press the let's go button. Once you've entered the password, press let's go. And then you can see a countdown.
It's gone off.
Yeah.
It's gone off. Yeah, I got that too.
It's because you hit a button as you put it into the thing, which is no good.
It's no good. It's when you put it in, it goes off because it's a button.
For anybody that can't get it to work, we're also going to be playing at the front, so you can look up there, but it's better to look through the glasses.
Turning itself. So the first one, so then 7, 6.
Oh, that's it. Right.
shocked. It went to black. I was just watching it on the screen now.
I'm going to put this phone in there for you in a minute. Right. Let's go. No, you put it in.
Oh, you need to put it in?
Has it gone on? Is it working for you? Has it gone on?
It's gone black.
Alright. You might be just better off watching the screen behind you. What these guys can see is a 3D version of this. And all it's doing is bringing it to life. Things that we can do in a digital future. Some of these things we do today. Some of them are future concepts. They're not necessarily banking related, they are more digital that fits within your day-to-day. But it's interactive, so these guys will decide to come up and tell them to look left and look right.
It is undoubtedly the funniest audience I've ever seen at a friend.
Yeah, it does present some good pictures to go on Twitter later
Vision of the future that's far away.
You have to physically look right, so quite turn right and then just progress to the next thing.
Finish, Jack.
Okay, I hope you all enjoyed that. It's just an insight of what could be coming up. If you want to come up and find me at the end, I'll just keep it to work, and we do need the phones back at the end. So you can keep the cardboard, and I'll hope I don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, quick bit of interactivity. Who felt digitally included in that exercise? Anyone feel digitally excluded? Anyone? Anyone amongst this highly digitally literate audience need digital education as a result of that? So plenty of work to be done. As I said a few minutes ago, we've got an extremely strong panel with a high degree of digital nous. I'm Peter Horrocks. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the Open University. The Open University owns the main free digital learning platform, FutureLearn, and works with universities to deliver free learning to learners in the UK and around the world. Previously, I was Director of the BBC World Service and Head of Multimedia News at the BBC. I was responsible for getting Nick Robinson and Robert Peston to tweet, so blame me if your timelines are full of their ramblings. We have Nick Williams next to me, Consumer Digital Director of Lloyds Banking Group, Matt Warman, MP for Boston and Skegness and a former Telegraph technology writer, Debbie Wosskow, who's the CEO of Love Home Swap, who's leading the government's review of the sharing economy, and next to me, Rachel Neaman, the Chief Executive of GoOn UK. And I'm delighted to say that Matt Hancock has joined us, who's Minister for the Cabinet Office and Paymaster General, and most importantly for this, he's the responsible for digital transformation of government and overall public sector reform, of which digital clearly plays a vital part. The only other credentials which I will mention are people's respective Twitter followership. Nick has 141, Matt has more than 4,000, I think, and Debbie has 1,626, Rachel 1,521, but Matt Hancock has 21.3 thousand followers. So in this particular contest is the digital lead.
Review with funny boxes on the front of it.
So let's get straight into it, and I'm sure the panellists will draw on their relevant expertise and explain a little bit further about their roles. But digital opportunity or threat? Rachel.
So I think the opportunities that digital affords are huge, and harnessing digital technology can improve outcomes as diverse as economic growth, productivity, social mobility, financial inclusion, educational attainment, employability, and health and well-being. And digital also provides opportunities for democratising access to information and services, so enhancing individual and societal collaboration and participation. And earlier this morning I spoke a bit on another panel about the power of digital to increase accountability, transparency and citizen engagement with government. So as such, digital should really be an equaliser, not a divider. Increased access to digital information and tools should maximise equality of opportunity. However, what we at GoOn UK are finding is a deepening divide between those that can transact and engage digitally and those that can't, with those that can't becoming disproportionately more disadvantaged than ever before because of the very pervasiveness of digital as a medium. So which groups are not yet ready for the digital revolution? Well, currently 10.5 million adults, 1.2 million small businesses, and 58% of all charities in the UK lack basic digital skills, by which we mean they can't fill in online forms and applications, they can't find information and support online, or even communicate effectively through email or other messaging services. And why does this matter? Well, it matters because whether we like it or not, digital skills are now essential to any effective modern society. And without these skills, people cannot participate fully in today's society, let alone tomorrow's. So who are these people? Well, they tend to be from lower socioeconomic groups, the elderly, the less educated, the long-term unemployed, and those with long-term health problems or disabilities. So ironically, given the push to digitise public services, many of the heaviest users of government and local government services are those most likely to be digitally excluded and therefore least likely to be able to access those services digitally. Universal credit obviously being a case in point. But I'd like to bust a few myths about who is and isn't digitally capable. So first we assume that all young people are digital natives. But even though they may be adept at communicating and managing their social lives using Facebook or Snapchat or WhatsApp, many can't fill out an online form, create a CV online, or find information online when they need it. In 2013, the OECD reported that the UK's young adults were falling behind their counterparts in the rest of Europe when it came to digital skills. The survey that they did showed that the number of 16 to 24-year-olds in England who failed a basic digital test was double that in Germany and triple that in France. The second myth is that we also assume that it's only older people who are digitally excluded. And while it is true that 57% of that 10.5 million are over 65, what that also means is that 43%, which is really just under half, are of working age. And back in 2012, a quarter of all jobs were already being posted online only. And it will be a much higher figure today. And if just under half of those lacking digital skills are of working age, how will they enter the job market if most job adverts are only posted online? And how do young people who can't fill in an online form or create a CV even get started? And it's not good enough to see these people as just the opportunity cost of the digital revolution. There's a clear link between giving individuals basic digital skills today and their ability to develop intermediate and higher level skills tomorrow. It's been estimated that by 2020, that's just the end of this Parliament, the UK will be looking to fill 1 million technology sector jobs, and over 90% of all jobs will require some level of digital capability. So bringing basic digital skills to everyone in the UK is the start of unlocking the UK's full social and economic potential in a digital age. So turning to threats, I want to briefly mention perhaps the most obvious one, but the importance for those that can participate digitally of security and safety online. We're seeing ever more sophisticated forms of digitally driven criminal activity that pose a genuine threat, whether to individuals, organisations or society at large. So at GoOn UK, we've made learning how to keep yourself safe online and being able to use technology and the internet appropriately a key element of what we define as basic digital skills. Clearly, we as individuals are exposed to offline crime as much as to online crime, if not more. But we're so much more aware of physical crime, and personal safety is hardwired into us from a very early age in a way that it's absolutely not online. So I wouldn't walk down a dark alleyway on my own late at night. But what is the cyber equivalent of doing just that, and how aware are we of it? Particularly if we're doing it in the comfort of our own home, on a sunny day with all our friends or family around us. So there's something for me here about how we recalibrate our risk assessments and awareness in the digital age, and not only for ourselves. We also need to safeguard vulnerable people in the cyber world in the same way as we safeguard them in the physical world. But the reality of doing so is far more complex when the interactions and interfaces are private and not public. The digital world, as we know, is developing rapidly, and perhaps the greatest challenge for us is whether we can keep up with the technology before it outpaces us. I remember when robots taking over the world was the stuff of sci-fi fiction, and now with recent developments in artificial intelligence, I'm not so sure. We've only just begun to exploit what the digital world can offer, and it can and does offer us massive opportunity. But we risk being left behind if we don't adjust our ways of living, our culture and our society to match it. And we can't afford to forget those for whom digital and technology remain completely out of reach.
Thanks, Rachel. Nick, do you want to go next in terms of opportunities and threats?
Yes, thank you. I think the need and the pace of change is the thing that in Lloyds Banking Group we've recognised the most over the last 5 years. It doesn't matter whether you're in the private sector or the public sector. If you're not operating in a digital world, then your consumers, your customers, your UK citizens are. And it's the consumer demand and the expectations that they now have of you, which is what's driving the major change within the bank. We have noticed that it's not our competitors as we would traditionally see them on the high street today are the ones that are setting expectations for our customers today. It's the new tech companies, the likes of Apple, eBay, Amazon. It's these types of organisations who are setting the experiences that customers and consumers expect to have. And the question that we get posed is, if it's so easy for me to go online and order a taxi or search for some information, why is it so bloody hard to bank with you? And therefore, that need is driven right across our organisation to change, to keep up, and actually being online is now just a hygiene factor. And that's why it's core to our strategy as a large corporate. We have a Chief Digital Officer who reports to the Group Chief Executive within the bank. We were the first bank in the UK to do that. We recognise that as an organisation we need to be more agile. We need to be able to change that the way we serve our customers quicker to keep up with the demands that they have. We need to continue to invest. We invested £750 million in the previous 3 years. We've made a commitment to invest a further £1 billion in digital over the next 3 years, simply to improve our experience that we give to our customers and keep up with what their expectations are. It also drives great efficiency and economy for us in terms of the scale of what we can do for all of our customers and small businesses. On a daily basis, I run a business that has 11 million active users. 6 million of them log on using a mobile phone. Just 4 years ago, that number would have been less than 1 million. I typically see 25,000 new users on a mobile device a week wanting to bank online using the mobile device. So the smartphone is becoming the remote control of your life. And one of the things you saw there just on that video, some of those things are future, some of those things you can do today. And the importance of technology and smart devices runs through everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. But the risk of exclusion, the important point that Rachel made, is very, very prominent within the banking industry as well. It is a societal device that can bring inclusion across all economies, but can be quite disruptive if not used appropriately. The challenge that we have is digital exclusion could lead to financial exclusion. Now, there are 2 million people in the UK today who don't have a bank account, who need one. If your main way of accessing your banking services is through digital, then we've got to make sure everyone has the opportunity to use digital to their benefit. And the risk of being left behind is there for us all to be seen. I not only work for the bank, I also serve within the NHS as a non-exec director within a mental health trust in Merseyside. I see with my work there how digital can really benefit the NHS, how we can provide 24/7 services to mental services that we provide to the community. The challenge is digital is complementary to face-to-face and frontline services. We should be careful about the substitution. We should make sure that digital services complement frontline services and not try to replace them where professional expertise is needed. And the same way in the NHS that's required, also within banking with our branches play a complementary role in the local communities, and our digital services complement them. We see partnerships as a key enabler. We work with GDS, we work with GoOn, we work with Tinder. We work with all of these organisations to help drive forwards the understanding of what digital exclusion can mean. We support Innovate Finance to try and make the UK the #1 destination for fintech on a global basis. And we work with the technology partners, Google, Apple, to take advantage of the latest technology so that we can bring that to our customers on a day-to-day basis. So closing, 2 points. One is digital presents an amazing opportunity for us individually and as small businesses to take that opportunity. But the risk of being left behind is there for us to be seen. And we cannot forget that the role of people within digital is at the heart of this. If you don't have the best people thinking about what your customers need, working out what the right solutions are, then unfortunately you'll build the wrong thing. If you don't have the best people engaging with your customers so that they understand and adopt what you built, then it's irrelevant what you've built. So let's not forget about people in the heart of digital.
Thanks, Nick. And let's have our first political contribution. I'll ask Matt Warman to give his balance between those opportunities and threats.
Thank you. I think if I can sort of start by panning back, if you think about what the theme of the last 5-6 years under a Conservative or a coalition government has been, it's been about pushing responsibility from the state toward the individual. So about taking more and more personal responsibility, whether that's through free schools, whether that's through devolution, whether that's through all sorts of the changes that we're going to see over the next 5 years. So actually the idea that your own relationship with the state is within your hands, is your phone, is very much the same message. Is this idea that digital is somehow an add-on to what the government is trying to do. Actually, they're absolutely embedded, and they should absolutely be part of the same thing, I think. And so when we talk about the digital opportunity, I think there is a risk that we pretend that digital literacy is somehow divorced from what we should now just be thinking of as literacy, that regular businesses are somehow different from digital businesses. I can't think of a single business that wouldn't be better off if it didn't have a website or a better website. So I think to an extent, we need to stop divorcing the two. We need to think of digital as absolutely key to everything that goes on. And I think the work of organisations like GDS has been great, and the new challenge for that stuff is to embed it into every department rather than to have something like GDS as a sort of the special forces that go in and fix brilliant things but aren't absolutely embedded into everything. And those opportunities, therefore, are far greater than we had thought. They're not just about putting the individual in charge of their own destiny, they're about making huge savings within government. If you think about whether it's even the health service, when we're at a position where the data allows you to do that app that says the waiting time at your A&E department is X hours, that will have a significant effect on demand as well as, I think, supply in some way. So it's odd that we've focused hugely on doing apps for bus stop waiting times, but we haven't focused very much on doing something that would have a much greater opportunity, and that's because it's much harder. Is actually getting data for that sort of stuff in the health service. To take an example, my wife's a doctor, so I like health service examples. Is really, really tough. But I think that's the real opportunity. And we know that people who are on the sort of GoOn agenda, we know that people who are online are likely to be 200 quid a year better off simply by virtue of being online, all of that. But this goes much deeper than simply being able to do online shopping and that sort of stuff. So from a state perspective, it's all the more important that the government is able to really get to the data that makes this stuff possible. And for me, almost all of this is about data, and it's about gathering the right data in the right way so that we can make it available to businesses, so that we can make it available to citizens. And the best example that we've had so far of that is the attempt to try and unlock health service data so that we were able to say that all doctors could easily see everyone's health records, so that when you turn up at A&E, it's really easy to find out whether you're allergic to penicillin or something that obvious. Now, I was working for the Telegraph when we had some, should we say, internal debates about whether we should be running a significant campaign that other newspapers also ran, that was saying, look, the risks of putting all this data into one big bucket are so enormous, whether it's through hacking, whether it's through the sort of slightly spurious claim that it was going to be sold to other businesses, that we shouldn't do it, and we should campaign against doing this. Now, there are huge risks against doing big digital projects, in the same way that there are huge risks in online banking. But we have worked out that the benefits of online banking far and away outweigh the risks that are associated with them. And the case that politicians need to make is that the benefits of digital far and away outweigh the risks of doing it, and that requires, I think, politicians to work much more closely with businesses, to work much more closely with the third sector, to say what we are trying to do here is so important and the opportunities are so vast that we've got to be able to be prepared to get out there and say it is worth the effort, it is worth the risk. It requires, in some ways, that bridging, for me, the digital divide requires political bravery more than it requires technological nous. Because an awful lot of what we're talking about doing, Tesco Clubcard's been doing some of the stuff we'd love government to be able to do for years, but we haven't been able to make the case sufficiently coherently. Part of that is because government, for whatever reason, doesn't have the best track record when it comes to IT. However, we need to be able to make the case that this is worth the effort, because the prizes at the end of it are so very big.
Thank you, Matt. Debbie.
Thank you. So I think that I'm here to talk today on behalf of the disruptors, because my day job is that I'm CEO of a business called Love Home Swap. Love Home Swap is under 4 years old, and it's a site which helps homeowners to swap their homes with people like them around the world. And it's only possible to exist in its current format, which is that it's now the biggest home exchange site in the world, because of digital technology, because of mobile technology, and because of online payment gateways that allow me to take money from 160 countries around the world 24/7. I'm also the upholder of the faith for the sharing economy. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a broad term to define ordinary people making money and saving money from the assets that they own, their homes, their cars, their power tools, their clothes, even their doggies, and the skills that they have. And the reason that this has become an important topic on the political and economic agenda is because these are new businesses that exist in the sharing economy, some of whom you will be very familiar with, that have now become household names like Airbnb, and latterly and controversially, which I will perhaps come to at the end, Uber. In terms of this becoming a government topic, I was asked by one of my fellow panel members to write the independent report for the government this time last year on the sharing economy to look at a few things. The first is whether there was outdated regulation that sat in the way of these new businesses growing and scaling. And the reason that this is important for the UK is the sharing economy is big business. It's already worth £9 billion globally. PricewaterhouseCoopers forecasts that it will be worth £230 billion by 2025. Nesta also tells us that it's something that we're good at doing in the UK. 25% of Brits are already sharing online. So it's here, and it's driving often a new generation of micro-entrepreneurs. What this is about is ordinary people making, as Airbnb demonstrates, an extra £3,000 a year in income, which is the average amount of money made by a London-based Airbnb host. So the report that I wrote, which was published towards the end of last year and to which the government responded in March, made around 30 recommendations, 28 of which were government, and 2 were for this new industry, which is embryonic. We've now come together to form a trade association which is self-regulating called Sharing Economy UK. which I'm the founder chair of, and we are focused on one really important thing in our first year of existence, which is building trust in the sharing economy. So when we look at what are the barriers for digital inclusion for something like the sharing economy, the obvious questions are, how can I trust a stranger in my home? How can I trust the person that I'm sharing a ride to Glastonbury with? How can I trust someone to be in charge of my Labrador for a few hours? So this embryonic industry is coming together in order to drive through some of this thinking and security itself. In terms of who this impacts, I'd pull out 3 key topics for the sharing economy. The first is a very important current topic for the Department of Business, which is around productivity. The sharing economy drives productivity in the UK, but it drives it in a completely new way that isn't captured by the traditional measurement of productivity based on GDP. So looking at how we can make households, people, their assets more productive, I think is a very big part of unlocking the productivity puzzle for UK PLC. The second point, and I think this relates to the ongoing scrap around Uber, is flexibility. Many participants in the sharing economy want to work more flexibly. They want to work in a different way. They want to work when they want to work. And this completely changes and develops the notion of the future of the workplace. And the third point in terms of audience is 65% of people participating in the sharing economy are women. And if we can unlock women who want to work in a different and more flexible way, who want to unlock the value of the assets that they own, then I think we can really help to combat this bigger topic of how digital disruption can drive change within the UK.
Thanks, Debbie. And lastly, Matt Hancock, and the role of government perhaps in terms of helping with these opportunities and threats.
Well, thanks very much. I'm not going to repeat any of the many of the things that have been said by some brilliant panellists who've put a huge amount of their lives into this agenda. I think it's incredibly exciting. It's vitally important for government. I see the digital agenda in government as about transforming the relationship between the citizen and the state. I don't think it's anything smaller than that. And so that this will have, I think, as big and as radical an impact on that relationship as it has on many private relationships, both between people to people, the introduction of Facebook and all of those people-to-people technologies, and the changes that it's driven between people and the companies that they buy things from or indeed bank with. Because if you say it's frustrating to be able to have to bring a bank into the modern technological world, well, the government is an even bigger beast than most banks, and I look forward to selling you soon. So it is fundamentally about transforming the relationship between the citizen and the state. Of course, it's also about enabling the relationship between the citizen and the workplace to change. That's about the regulatory piece about how the whole economy works, and I pay tribute to Debbie's work, which has been absolutely groundbreaking in that area. But within government, we've got a very clear goal. Firstly, we need to make it easier to interact with the government and follow the user. What is the user need? At the moment, many services are defined around the needs of departments. We need to make them defined around the need of the user. That means agile approaches. It means an iterative approach to policy making as well as to delivery. It was interesting, Matt, you talked about having to win the public's trust for big projects, and especially in the data space. But I would argue that the approach we do that should be to start small and grow, rather than to bring in a great big clunking IT system and win the case for that, because those days are gone. The way that we're introducing universal credit is agile. It's about getting it right and learning from the experience of rolling it out gradually over the country, and the rollout is going well. So the first piece is about digital transformation. The second thing is that this also, I think, is the only way we're going to unlock the kind of savings that we need to make. And this is not as exciting a mission, but it's just as necessary a mission, it's a critical part of delivering a sustainable government that, frankly, can operate in the modern environment. And the final thing I'll say is that we have to make sure that it works for people, the citizens, and this brings me to digital inclusion. The key lesson and response to the challenge of digital inclusion that you outlined so powerfully is not to stop transforming digitally, it is to get people up to speed. And I sometimes challenges of digital inclusion can make people think, well, since we have to provide universal services in government, which nobody else really has to, banks do to a degree, but most corporates don't have to, therefore digital transformation is more difficult. Well, this is true, but we have to build digital transformation for the mainstream and then support those who haven't got there yet and put a huge amount of effort, and GoOn UK does that and champions that, but there's an enormous amount of role for government in making sure that can happen too. But we've got to be very effective in how we do it, and one of the most effective ways is through the use of incentives. For instance, before universal credit was rolled out, a very low proportion of people chose to get their benefits in an online way. When we brought in a system that was much more user-friendly and put benefits through it, suddenly it incentivized people to understand to learn how to use the internet. So you can use some of these interventions in order to get digital inclusion up, rather than simply say, there's a huge barrier there that we're never going to overcome. So I think we need to be positive and optimistic in our approach to digital inclusion. But ultimately, here we are at this conference talking about what the government's going to do over the next 5 years, and if we don't get the digital agenda right and drive the changes that we need, we won't be able to deliver the improvement in the way that Britain works that we all want to see.
Thank you. I'm going to throw it open in a few minutes, so do think about the interventions that you want to make. But just picking up on a couple of those things, Matt. When you're in government, does it feel like you're leading, or does it feel like you're playing catch-up? Because you've got technologies that are moving very fast, they're global. You talked about the big beast of government.
Yeah.
Is it something that you can lead the way on, or is it really just about being responsive?
Well, clearly we were a long way behind, and now in some areas of government we're cutting edge, and it's exciting. And there's, if you're some of the things, for instance, that the DVLA are doing are absolutely the best in the world and best in class. But A, we've got to stay there, and B, we've got to spread that. At the moment, in the past Parliament, we took the approach of looking at individual services. There's 750-odd services where the government and citizens interact. We looked at the top 25 services, and we transformed 20 of them. And if you've applied for your driving licence online, you'll know that it's a pretty good system and it works pretty well. There's some that are in the weeds that people won't know about. If you've ever had to apply for lasting power of attorney, it's an incredibly difficult process in the past. It always comes at a very difficult period in time, because it's nearly always when your partner or spouse has dementia and you need to take responsibility for their future. It was incredibly difficult at a time when you were under pressure, and we've transformed that. It's much easier, and it's a massively compassionate social change that's been enabled by digital technology, really cutting edge. But then there's areas where we've got a huge amount to do, and we're a long way behind. And we have this potential, I see it, to catapult, to leap a few technology cycles and to really get to the front.
Okay, I mean, Debbie, in terms of what you're asking government to do, is it really just to get rid of antiquated regulation, to kind of get out of the way of the sharing economy, or is there more of a kind of enabling role for the government in terms of supporting the kinds of businesses that you represent?
Yeah, and the answer is it's both of the above, and progress has already been made. So if you look at the different segments of the sharing economy, the two best developed are accommodation and transport. In other words, the world of Airbnb and the world of Uber and BlaBlaCar. There was already this year a lot of progress through the Deregulation Act that was passed through the Lords that re-regulated the 1973 Greater London Powers Act. For those of you who are close to policy around shared accommodation, meant that prior to that you were unable to sublet your home within London because of a piece of regulation from the 70s that was put in place to stop people from turning council houses into hotels. You can now be an Airbnb landlord, if you like, for up to 90 days in London, rather than face threat of up to a £20,000 fine. So that has already happened. In terms of the transport topic, I think everybody is well aware of the current conversation about Uber, and without being dragged into that too much, it is, I think, an important aside to note that we are in danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater around the Uber conversation because of those 25 TfL recommendations, 2 of them also related to outlawing ride sharing, which, with my sharing economy hat on, is very worrying because this is a business which has been in operation for around 20 years and makes a huge difference to rural communities, makes a big difference in terms of the digital economy, where you have a player like BlaBlaCar, which is an enormous business outside of the UK, but also within it. So it is an ongoing regulatory conversation, and this is a sector which is in its infancy. So we're seeing a lot of innovation in food, in fashion, in power tools. All of these businesses hit red tape regulation in order to be able to scale up. So my ask for government is that we continue the dialogue as this sector shapes. Because Airbnb was only founded in 2008, so, and that's probably the granddaddy of the sharing economy. So there is a lot more innovation to come, and we need to ensure that it's not being held back, because this is genuinely a sector where the UK is leading on a global basis.
And Rachel, for your agenda, is that about the government being enabling, or is it simply about government removing barriers?
I think it's definitely about government being enabling, and I think it's not just for government to be enabling, it's very much a cross-sector issue, and I think we need to be very clear about that. We heard Nick talking about the work that Lloyds Bank do in this space, and it's not something that only government can fix. But there is an issue of barriers, and the key barriers, and I completely agree with Matt Hancock that motivation, having the incentive to get people online is a key one, but then so is access. So we need to make sure that people can access. So there's a whole discussion about broadband access or Wi-Fi access, and making sure that we've got the coverage that we absolutely need, because it doesn't matter if people are motivated to go online or if they have the skills if they can't access the internet. The other thing is cost. If people are feeding their families from a food bank, they're very unlikely to be spending money on a subscription for broadband, or very unlikely to be upgrading to the latest smartphone. So how do we then help people like that, who are probably those most eligible for universal credit, to get their universal credit online? So I think going back to the discussion about user need and the focus that this government has, the previous government has clearly done, government digital service, has clearly brought to government on user need. We do need to target who those users are, and those users aren't one size fits all. So the user for universal credit is probably going to need much more help digitally than the user for a different government service like a car tax or a passport.
Thank you. Let's throw it open. Take 2 or 3 comments. If you can identify yourself and also say who you're directing your point to. This is the first one here.
Hi, Dan Morgan from Innovate Finance for Nick. Hi, Dan Morgan. Hello. Hi, Dan Morgan from Innovate Finance for Nick and Matt. Completely agree about the opportunities that digital and data provides, but one of the major barriers that our members raise is around the concept of identity online, and around how the regulation is often quite analogue, especially for financial services, and that there's a lot of opportunity to build on that, to create a digital footprint around discovering who someone is. I know the government's also doing stuff quite a lot around verification as well. Quite interested to hear your thoughts.
We'll pass the microphone forward to the gentleman in front of you as well. Just there, yeah.
Philip Chalmers from Atos. A question from Matt Warman. Completely agree over the data is the sort of crown jewels within this. It's how we'll transform, it's how we'll save. I guess you were talking about care.data when you were talking about the big programme. So how do we get the balance right in terms of do we lean towards opt-out rather than opt-in terms of data, or do we try and get the there's something in it for me bit so that people are bought into it?
Okay, let's take those 2. Nick, do you want to go first, then Matt Hancock, then Matt Warman after that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of the biggest challenges is how do you identify people digitally? What you may assumed to be a relatively straightforward thing to do actually isn't. Particularly in financial services, where we have anti-money laundering checks and KYC checks that we need to perform to ensure that we truly understand who the end customer is. Now, traditionally, we would have used credit rating agencies who provide Experian-type data in terms of credit quality, etc., around consumers, but that's not wholly complete. So, if you're new to the country, if you're a student who's graduating, if you've moved home quite frequently, quite often you won't have a digital footprint or a credit footprint which is able to identify you securely. Therefore it presents how do you identify. Now, we've been working in collaboration with GDS at looking at how we can use identity protocols that already exist today. So there is no unique identifier in the UK that we all have that we could use. Your passport, your driving licence, these numbers are not unique or portable across all of the services. However, there are protocols today which we can reuse. So your banking credentials actually set the benchmark in terms of the level of authentication you go through to be able to identify somebody. So there's perhaps a reason where we can authenticate on behalf of other organisations where we know that customer, and vice versa, which is if a customer comes to us who we don't have a relationship with, then can I authenticate who that consumer is because they have records with the government, and therefore we can share our identification protocols to be able to do that, rather than to try and create a single ubiquitous identity. But it's a great opportunity for fintech. And there are a number of organisations out there at the moment who are helping to contribute to solve this problem.
Matt?
Well, I'm glad to say I'm going to give exactly the same answer, but from a government point of view, we have chosen rightly in the UK not to have a national identity system, and instead using different forms of identity verification is important. The gov.uk Verify is an important step in trying to solve this, but not by having a government database, instead by using, in I think quite an innovative way, a market for verification, and using verification that is required by other organisations. And it's and it should also lead to a simplification for the user, because you then have one process that you are typically go through. But there's new technological opportunities in this all the time. If you think about the potential of using the blockchain to have a unique and decentralised verification system that can't then be altered, the possibilities of that have only just started to be explored, and at the moment in finance, but I think there's potential for opportunities much more broadly as well for unique verification of identity. It's absolutely mission critical to the full digitisation of government interactions that we get this right. We also have to be careful, though, to know that the starting point is not perfect verification of identity. Offline verification of identity is both incredibly cumbersome, like asking me to go to my bank. I mean, other than for identification verification purposes, I haven't been to my bank for the last 15 years, and I don't want to have to take an hour out of my day to go to my bank. And so it's not perfect in terms of the user need, but it's also not perfect in terms of reliability. And so I can see a world in which we have more assured verification of identity in a way that's more convenient. And so you can get the benefits that you get in other parts of the digital space of making life easier and it be cheaper and better for people. Just one word on the data question, which ties in a sense, in the same way that we're not having a national ID system and database. I think that the world has moved on from saying that the answer to every data problem is to have one big database into which all the data is put. The world has moved to the solutions being around interoperability and having decent APIs, and making sure that when data is in use, it's in use that can be securely, that different databases can talk to each other where that's appropriate and securely. And actually, when you're transforming a legacy system, it's much easier to start from that starting point rather than saying, okay, how would we build this if we had a blank sheet of paper? One of the problems of government is that you never have a blank sheet of paper. We've got 1,000 years of history of legacy systems, and you know, we won't be going out of business anytime soon. So you've got to have a way to bring your legacy systems and databases with you whilst you move into this properly and fully digitised world.
Thanks, Matt Warman.
I absolutely echo a lot of what Matt said. Is sort of that idea that you have one big IT project or one big data set is obviously not going to work. And also, if you think about commissioning someone to build it, by the time they would have built it, it's already out of date. So you've got to think in that sort of smaller, more agile way. And the fact that government is not thinking, let's have one big identity project, let's think of it in a much more diffuse way that you can aggregate a whole load of things together to come up with a much more secure solution, is obviously sensible. It doesn't make it any easier, but it is obviously at least the right way to be doing it. In terms of how do you motivate people to sort of see the benefits of this stuff, I think it's always a bit of both. It's always a bit of saying there's a lot in this for you, and it's cheaper for government, and it's cheaper. That should therefore translate into lower taxes. All of that stuff, or at least a sustainable economy. Whatever. So I think you've got to sort of be willing to have a bit of carrot and a bit of stick. And actually, if you look at the rollout of universal credit, then there has been a very, very careful, so universal credit in my constituency is very low numbers, but the very hardest group of people to reach. And that's why that's exactly the right approach, I think. And there's been a lot of hand-holding with people who didn't have the digital skills, and they are actually now better off because they have got more digital skills and they've got a new benefit that is better than the morass of benefits they had before. So this is a win-win, but it's a heck of a complicated win-win.
Thank you. Contribution from the back.
Hi there, Crispin Williams from Proof Communication. I just had a question specifically on digital skills. I mean, we heard from the panel that digital shouldn't be an add-on, it should be across everything, and also that we shouldn't assume that young people have digital skills in the way that perhaps we do. Specific question to the government's apprenticeship programme. Obviously want to deliver 3 million in the next parliamentary term. How can we ensure that digital skills or those requirements are embedded across that apprenticeship spectrum?
Matt, do you want to take that first? And
Well,
then
yeah, I mean, look, apprenticeships are only one part of the education system. Yes, digital skills are important in many apprenticeships, not all, and specifically apprenticeships in the world of digital media, and others are being developed. But actually, it's much broader about the whole education system. One of the changes I'm most proud of in the last Parliament is introducing coding into the curriculum from the age of 8. I mean, from the age of 8, my daughter's 8, she's just started doing it. It's absolutely fantastic, and I think, I know this is not a slow burn answer to the skills shortage. It's not like we're going to have our 8-year-olds coding in Lloyds Bank anytime in the next 10 years, I hope. But it is part of the answer, and it addresses the challenge from GoOn UK that you've got to make this universal.
Rachel, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, sure. I think it goes back to the point that I think, Matt, you made earlier about this is equal, having digital skills should be equal to being literate and numerate. So it is something that if we're giving apprenticeship, if we're supporting those who are taking on apprenticeships with their literacy and numeracy skills, we should also be applying digital skills to that as well. And I think one thing we need to think about is this isn't just about the education system. Coding in schools is great. But actually, what about lifelong learning? So again, if you go back to the 42-year-old person who's been unemployed for 10 years, who doesn't have digital skills, who can't look for a job online because he doesn't know or she doesn't know how to, and they're out of the education system, then how are they supposed to get those skills? So I think any back-to-work offer, any back-to-work scheme needs to include digital skills as important for for entering a workplace or in fact being capable of doing anything in society as literacy and numeracy. So I think it's absolutely essential that we think of all of those 3 planks and not just the first 2.
Nick, you want to come on this?
Yeah, I think it's it goes across the private sector as well. So just to share some of the things that Lloyds have been doing, we've committed to have 20,000 digital champions across the UK in all of the communities that we serve through our branch network. And the role of those champions are to embrace digital technology and help our customers understand the basic skills to bank online, but to use the devices that they have every day. We've created our own digital academy where we bring in our own apprentices from school and to help develop the internal skills that we need going forwards as well. So I think a lot of large corporates can help to develop programs. We work with the Tinder Foundation to develop the training within-house, within the bank. We've also been in the North East community with small businesses where our research showed, a third of small businesses didn't have the right skills. And actually what that demonstrated was, we can do the analysis and do the research at a national level, but actually to get underneath, you need to engage in the local community. And the work that we did with Tinder in the North East showed that peer-to-peer sharing across non-competing industries is the best way to learn. So actually you can learn a lot from your neighbour.
And from the Open University's point of view, the largest university, which is delivering through digital, being able to use both free learning and paid learning in order to be able to upskill, absolutely to Rachel's point, not just about 8-year-olds or 18-year-olds, and being able to do that throughout people's working lifetimes is absolutely critical. Matt, is there anything you want to add on this?
Well, I just think where the idea that apprenticeships are absolutely key is yes they are, but it does come back to that lifelong learning thing. It's that I was unlucky enough to go to school when IT consisted of how to use Microsoft Word. But actually, in a weird way, we now need to acknowledge that being able to use all those programs is a key part of everyone's job anyway. So we've got to get the balance right between conventional between coding and the sort of much more mundane sort of basic literacy.
This is a comment over here. Yes, one there, and one there, and then we'll start to wrap so people can get back in.
Philip Virgo, Conservative Technology Forum. I've just spent a couple of days on the Isle of Man, which for various reasons is one of the test beds for innovation in financial services, technology and other things. And they seem to be looking at a couple of ways forward, which I found most intriguing. One, when dealing with the digitally and socially excluded, you use the postman as the first point of contact, both for those who are both housebound and excluded. And I'd like to throw that one in, the future of the post office and so on. But the other one is that they're using very innovative approaches for blockchain-based identities and sharing, but a concept on sharing of government information where you not only give granular permission as to what you permit to be shared, but you also request and order that data be shared. You follow the Estonian thing that it's illegal to claim, to ask for data that's already with the government department, which the individual has asked should be shared. And I'd like to throw that one in as, again, a point of leverage for helping make progress on things that otherwise look intractable.
Okay, thank you for those interesting ideas. And one comment over here.
Hi, my name's Helen White. I'm from the Money Advice Service, where I'm leading work to develop a national financial capability strategy to improve people's capability. And I see, for example, the importance of all of this being not just about moving the excluded from being the included, but also improving the capability of people who are included but need better skills. Somebody, I think it was Matt, was talking earlier about the fact that we're creating a lot more personal responsibility for people. That responsibility should go hand in hand with much greater power. But my real concern is that we're creating responsibility without the capability for people to use that power. So my question, and I apologise if it's a reflection of my ignorance and others in the room know the answer to this, but do we have a national digital capability strategy which is going to bring together all sorts of organisations to collaborate and coordinate to improve capability of digital skills, to help people use those powers?
Rachel, do you want to take that one and sort of give your sort of concluding thoughts, as we should probably wrap quite soon?
Yeah. I mean, the simple answer to that is that there isn't one single coherent national strategy, but that is something that we at GoOn UK and all our partners, both in the voluntary sector, in the private sector and in government, are trying to put together, because you are absolutely right, that is the key thing that is missing. We have started to put together what are the basic definitions of these skills so that people can at least all work within a single framework, and how do you evaluate these things and how do you assess these skills. But we are still a long way from where we need to be, and that's absolutely why we all need to work together cross-sector to make this work.
And asking for final comments from everyone, from Debbie, this balance between anxiety about digital and opportunity on digital, are we getting to the right place on that?
I hope so. I think that all of the data shows that the UK gets better and better at this, but my final point, which hasn't really dominated discussion today, but has on various other panels that I've been involved with, is if we are to succeed, then we need to make sure that we're fully engaging women in digital, which is a problem that we face in the UK where we're not as good as other countries in the world.
Totally agree. That woman?
I think that capability versus responsibility question is really key. The one thing I would say is if you look at what's happened with the pension reforms, then people are a lot more responsible than people had initially feared. So actually putting power into people's hands, by and large, with appropriate safety nets in the right place, people understand what they're doing. So we shouldn't. So I think there's sometimes a risk that you sort of say, well, people who are digitally excluded are going to make the wrong decision because of all the demography around it. I don't think there's a lot of evidence. So we should have more faith in people than perhaps people tend to. They elected a Conservative government, right? So we should have lots of faith in people. But I think the overall theme of this stuff has to be about making the case. You have to be able to say it is worth doing this stuff. And if even the postman thinks it's worth doing this stuff, then we've got to be right?
Thank you. And Nick?
I think for me, it's all about giving people choice. And there are many people out there who will choose to interact in a digital way. And we shouldn't confuse digital savviness, certainly in my world, with financial literacy. So just because you know how to use the devices doesn't mean that you understand the financial decisions you're making. But I agree with Matt's comment in terms of giving the control to the consumer to make those choices. And the key to choice is for those that don't want to use a digital means, have the opportunity to still engage with people. And it could be the postman, but it also could be a digital solution, which is simple video technology for you to talk to someone who has that expertise and skill through a digital means. And therefore, you've got that face-to-face interaction with the expert, but you don't need to physically travel anywhere.
Thanks. And last word to Matt.
Well, it looks like I'm going to be going to the Isle of Man soon. So I'll look into those ideas, and I was noting them down. On this last point, I think you put your finger on a really important question, and I have an absolutely unambiguous answer to it, which is that if we think that we shouldn't extend the digital capability because we're worried about how people might be able to use it, we are completely mad and wrong. You know, all of the evidence is that people rise to the responsibilities that they're given. And more important, if you manage to allow government to deliver for the mainstream digitally so they don't have to have a human interaction, you can use all of the resources that frees up to help the people who can't interact digitally even more. And this is happening today in job centres, like Matt was talking about. In job centres around the country, there are more people, because unemployment's lower and because where universal credit has been rolled out, it's easier for most people to be able to deal with it. That means people in job centres have more time to help those who are otherwise digitally excluded. And if we think that anything in digital, if any of the lessons of digital are that we should have a more sort of patronising approach to people, instead of giving them the power and the responsibility, then that's completely counter to the massive liberation that this new technology is bringing. So I'm incredibly excited about this agenda, but I think we have to be very careful not to stop ourselves from taking advantage, because the world is challenging and imperfect and not everybody can interact immediately. Of course, you've got to make sure services remain universal, so there'll always be a phone line or somewhere that people can go to for a universal government service. But by God, this is a massive opportunity and we really need to seize it.
Matt, thank you for ending on that confident note. We've touched on virtual security, but there's the real physical security to be negotiated, and it took a bit of time this morning, so I want to make sure everyone can get away. Just checking from Lloyds Banking Group, are these gifts for people to take away? Or?
Hold
No,
on,
so-
taxpayers still own Lloyds Bank.
So please leave your cardboard binoculars and the smartphone
You
behind.
can take the cardboard.
Take the cardboard binoculars. Okay, so Lloyds Banking
Devices
being
we need back.
very generous. Can you join in thanking our excellent panel? Thank you very much for attending as well.